Good morning, everyone. I read a little story last night that I'd like to share with you. There was a journalist who was assigned by his newspaper to their office in Jerusalem. So he moved to Jerusalem and he got himself a little apartment that had a view looking down over the Wailing Wall. And he watched for many weeks and he realized there was one older Jewish gentleman who came every day for hours, and he prayed fervently. He could just watch him moving and praying with a lot of energy. So one day he went down and he introduced himself to the man, and he said, "I've just noticed that you come here every day and you pray for long hours." And the man thought for a couple of minutes and he said, "Yes, I come every day." And the man said, "Well, what are you praying for?" And the man thought for a minute and he said, "What am I praying for?" Then he said, "Well, in the morning I pray for world peace. Then I pray for brotherhood among all men. Then I go home and I have a glass of tea. Then I come back," he said, "and I pray for the eradication of all illness and diseases all around the world." And the journalist is really taken with this. And he said, "You do this every day?" And this man says, "Do I do it every day?" "Yes, I do it every day." He said, "Well, how many years have you been doing this?" And the man said, "How many years?" He said, "I've been doing it for 20 or 25 years. And the journalist was so taken with his dedication and devotion. And he said to him, "Well, how does it feel to be coming here for 20 years and praying for these things every day?" And the man stops and he said, "How does it feel?" He said, "I feel like I'm talking to the wall." That, of course, is not how we feel about prayer. This is an interesting moment in our readings every year because, and I've mentioned this before when I've been up here giving this particular talk, Swamiji has a whole section of this book that we read from in the expanded version of it called Rays of the One Light, Rays of the Same Light, an entire section on prayer. 3 weeks in a row now, we'll talk about prayer. Today, the topic is, what is the most effective way to pray? But prayer is clearly it's just at the very core of our path. Of course, it's at the core of many paths, but not only does he devote several weeks of the year to it, but Master wrote Whispers from Eternity, which we read from every week, which is really a book of prayers, and with a whole foreword about how to pray from Master. And in our affirmations, every week we say a prayer, and there's a chapter in the essence of self-realization. It's just such a obviously meaningful thing. And the obvious question comes up, why is that? And I think the answers are somewhat obvious too, that prayer is a way to talk to God. Prayer is this extraordinary opportunity for us to offer ourselves to God, to move towards God, not necessarily to call him towards us, because God is always there for us, but for us to move towards him. It's a perfect opportunity for us to invite divine guidance, to really say with our prayers that we want to move to that place of hearing from the divine and to transcend our minds, which will, by their very nature, just keep us bound to delusion. That's what the mind's job is. as we often say, and to have us move from ego awareness, which is the mind, which separates us from the divine, to soul awareness, to that place of knowing that life is really an opportunity for us. In fact, the only purpose in this life is for us to really refine our relationship with God. And so we do much of that through prayer. I was thinking yesterday that prayer is really on a continuum that ultimately leads to samadhi, or that place of knowing in body, mind, and soul, as Yogananda has said, that we all are already one with the infinite, that we don't have to try and become anything. We just have to move to a place of remembering who we are. That's that's what life is about, from ego to soul consciousness, and this tremendous opportunity that we're given. Also to raise our energy, because energy for us is the medium of transformation. It is how we will change. Every time we sit and we go to pray and we raise our energy and we focus our attention at the point between the eyebrows, we sit in a moment of possibility, of transformation. Helen recently gave one of our classes on the saints, and she talked about Frau Angelica. It was actually quite a wonderful class. It's now up on the web, so you can all hear it and actually see it. It was video recorded. But it was so remarkable listening to how his medium, now he was saintly, at least he was a saint, though I'm not sure he was ever recognized by the church in that way. His medium was paint. He would put paint in his hands, and she showed us many pictures, the Annunciation being the one that captured her the most. And from that, I was thinking how you can put a lump of clay in front of an artist with no understanding of what it'll become. But if it's their medium, then that becomes the way that they find God. He painted, they sculpt. We can pray. We can use energy as the medium to be transformed if we just keep offering ourselves up. A couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine was talking to me about how hard it is to try and understand, and of course that would make it very hard. The answer, she said, is always to meditate more. But what if you can't meditate? How do you get there when it's too hard to sit and meditate? And in that discussion, I tried to share the knowing that even the intention to meditate, the effort, just sitting, even for a moment or two, or pronaming in front of the altar, begins to work with that energy and transform us in ways that are unimaginable. But the answer didn't really satisfy her. And I realized that prayer on this continuum is one of the activities, one of the tools that we've been given that we can use, because we don't have to be in any particular state to pray. We don't even have to sit still to pray. We can just walk around and talk to God. And we can talk to God in any language, whatever is our own, from a simple little call for help, literally, help, I'm in trouble, to long and involved in deep prayers, just holding God like He's our very best friend. So I thought that's one of the ways that you move toward being able to sit to meditate. I saw a wonderful movie a couple of weeks ago that I highly recommend called The Queen of Katwe. And it's a movie, it's a true story, which is important, and it takes place in Uganda. And it's the story of a man who has a calling and an inspiration to teach children from the slums of Uganda how to play chess. He's actually an electrical engineer, but he's not working as an engineer. He's working as a coach. But on this side, he takes these groups of children who are living, as I said, in the slums. And for those of you who have been to these third world developing countries, you know what that means. And this is an important part of it. For those of you who haven't, many of these children were living outside, sometimes with a little drape over them, sometimes not, often living in streets where sewage can run over them at night, always sleeping huddled up together in a tiny little space with their whole family. And he just falls in love with these children. And he sees their potential, and he sees that they just simply have not been offered a way to get from where they are to realize their potential. And he starts teaching them chess. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole movie, but at one point, this is why I'm telling you this story, he takes them away for the first time to compete in a chess tournament. And they're put up in this room, dormitory rooms. They each have a little bed and blankets, and the room is clean. And he comes in the next day and he finds them, and all the beds are perfectly made, and they're huddled under the bed in big groups, just holding on to each other, totally terrified. They wake up and they just start crying. We want to go home. We don't want to be here. We don't want to compete. We need to go home. They had never seen anything like it. And he looks at them and he thinks for a while, and then he tells them this story. He says there was a dog and a cat, and the dog started chasing the cat. It was a hungry dog and a skinny dog. And he started chasing the cat because he was going to eat the cat. And the cat was flying around and the dog was flying after him. And at one point, the cat jumped over a fire that was burning, and the dog stopped. And the dog was, as I said, hungry and skinny, and he had been chasing the dog, and he just laid down. And so then, I think it was the dog's friends. I'm not sure who asked him this because I wasn't watching the movie thinking I was going to be telling this story. Said to him, "Why did you stop? Why didn't you keep going?" And the dog said, "I was only running for a meal. He was running for his life." And it really speaks to an element of what we need to bring into our prayer. That's of desperation, of knowing how much we need to feel God's presence in our life as being what it is that will drive us to pray in a way that will make prayer effective. We've all heard the story of the young, or many of us have, of the young man who keeps bothering his guru to give him samadhi, to take him to God. Finally, the guru says, "Come with me." And he takes him down to the river, and he puts his head under the water. And the disciple didn't think anything of it, but he holds him there, and he holds him there, and he doesn't let him up until finally the disciple is flailing, desperate to get out of the water. And at last, the guru brings him up by his hair, and he says to him, "What did you want when you were under the water?" He said, "I wanted to breathe." He said, "What was your last thought before I let you up?" And he said, "Air. I wanted air." And the Guru says, when you want God that badly, come back to me. There is this place where we need to want God that badly, to be able to pray with that strength, with that intensity, with that fervor. There's a wonderful story about that Yogananda tells in Autobiography of a Yogi that takes place right before he's ready to leave to come to the United States. And he's been told by Sri Yukteswar that he was chosen to come and he should come here and everything's going to be fine. He's going to give him the English he needs. People will want him. They'll want to hear his teachings. But just right before Yogananda's ready to go, he starts having some doubts. So he sits down in his room and he begins to pray. And he begins to pray, is this the right thing? Am I worthy? Am I going to be able to do this? And he's praying, but God's not coming. And he says these words in that story. He said, I felt like if I sobbed as deeply as I was sobbing, if I prayed as fervently as I was praying, one more time, my brain would split open. Those were Yogananda's words. And he said, just then, a stranger appears at the door. And the rest of the story is that the stranger turned out to be Babaji, who appeared to him. And Babaji, besides telling him, this is your work to do, I told Sri Yukteswar that I would send him someone, and that was you. But he also said to him, I heard the depth of your prayer. I heard how desperately you wanted me to come. I heard one of the teachers, I can't remember who it was, tell a story from the 1970s when somebody asked Swami Kriyananda, what does it take to stay on the path? Because we've all seen it. People come onto the path, they're exuberant about being on a spiritual path, about having a spiritual awakening, but so many people leave the path. And someone asked Swamiji, what does it take to stay on the path? And Swamiji's answer was, you have to practice the teachings. Second, he said, self-honesty, letting ourselves know where we are, who we are, what is our next step. And third, he said, you have to come to the realization that it is a life or death proposition. That staying on the path is a life or death proposition. Now, so many times people have asked me, both in my professional work and at church, can't I do this sort of halfway, or isn't there another way? And I always feel terrible about this. And I mean it because you don't want people to have to leave. But the absolute truth is, it's an all or none proposition. There's no other way. And it's not just all or none, but we have to be desperate for it. Like every one of those stories that I just told, we have to know, in essence, our life depends on it. It may not be an imminent life or death thing, like with a major medical issue, but ultimately, to fulfill the purpose of this life, we have to get on the path and we have to stay on it. Now, we're not all where Swamiji was when we pray. I remember Swamiji used to say he would sit down and he would ask for something, whether it was the words to a song or the music for a song, or just be open for the next words to come through for a book. And they would come. That was the level of his attunement to his master. But really, he spoke to us in that way to show us one of the first qualities behaviors, ways of holding prayer. We have to know what we want when we sit down to pray. Our soul has to be concentrating on what is its question, what is it looking for. You don't just sit down and pray and say, sometimes we do, okay, Divine Mother, I'm here, I'm sitting in front of you. But when you want something, and particularly when you're wanting it with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength, you have to know what that is. You can't be sitting down to pray out of habit. It can't be mindless. Why would God pay attention to us? Where's the magnetism in that? How can we draw divine energy to ourselves or us to that divine energy when we can't even formulate an idea of what it is we want? So we decide what we want. Then we sit down with great intensity, with great desire, and we bring devotion to it. We don't sit down in a cold, dispassionate way. Again, we can't draw on the divine that way. We bring our heart into it. We know what we want, and we sit down and we say, I'm going to open my heart to you. Here I am, God. I'm going to bring all of the passion, all of my devotion, not emotion, not like that, but devotion. There was a young monk who, when he first came to SRF, started having these very fervent, would roll on the floor and scream to God when he was praying. And the other monks would tell him, maybe you better hold back on your devotion a little bit. They literally said that. So one time he passed Master a note in the other monk's company. Is it okay to be this fervent when I'm praying? And Master said with great clarity, absolutely. He said, get down on the ground and roll and scream to God that you want him. You know, we're trying to speak to the divine who is listening for the whisperings of our souls, the silent call of our souls. We say it every week in the festival, wordless yearning. Every time I hear that phrase, where does it take us? It takes us right to the heart. So we know what we want. We come to it with fervor, with desire, with intensity, with devotion, and also with faith. I was listening to a Christian minister giving a sermon. I can't remember why I was doing that, because I remember thinking everything he's saying felt like our path, but the words and the energy did not. But he said something that really stuck with me. He said, people are always talking about developing faith in miracles, like can miracles happen? He said, what about looking at it as miracles of faith? What if we go into prayer with faith and then we see miracles? There's a line that I've shared many times from Thich Nhat Hanh, who said, miracles are natural. When they do not occur, something has gone wrong. What was he saying? We're always one with God. What we consider miracles just happen in those moments when our faith, when our desire, when our clarity is such that we know we are one with God. Then everything looks like a miracle. And we draw those miracles to ourselves because we allow God to really enter and take charge of our lives. And finally, to pray believing. These are all the ways that Master said to us, all of the qualities that we had to bring to prayer, to pray believing. And Jesus said it. Now, I won't have that quote from the Bible, but we know it. Whatever it is we pray for believing, that shall be given to us. To go into a prayer knowing that it is God's promise to us, in essence, that faith and believing are stronger than the physical laws of the universe. And we don't have to have all of this together. We don't have to be Swami Kriyananda. We don't have to have evolved to that degree. We need to sit down and say to God, I'm here, even before we say it, because thoughts are energy. And that's where we are connected to the divine. So before we crystallize them with words, which are our prayers, even that intention, that's why I realized I wished I had said to my friend, why don't you start with some prayers? Why don't you just talk to God in the midst of your day? Whatever you're doing, why don't you approach God like a friend? That's what he wants. He doesn't want us praying to him or at him. He wants us praying with him, beyond words, in joy, in love. Okay, Divine Mother, let's you and I go shopping now. Let's do this little chore that we don't have to do. Come and sit and pray with me. Come and sit and meditate with me. To just keep inviting God in as a friend, as your dearest friend. As Master said, he's nearer to you than your thoughts. He's dearer to you than your thoughts. He is you. He is already those thoughts. So with that simple little plan of deciding what we want, of sitting down with great faith, with belief, with devotion, just to try that, even as we move through our day. These are the ways Master taught us to pray. You know, I had no idea what the choir was singing today. Of course, I never do. And I thought, oh, why didn't I call Karen and ask her, could the choir please sing Keep Calling Him? I did, just last night, because those words that Swami wrote, they're so beautiful. They are the perfect prayer and the perfect guidance, even when there's no reply. Even under every circumstance, he walks between that song and God, God, God that Master wrote. Go home, find them. They're easy to find on the internet. Listen to this song over and over. I would say to you, listen to Erica, because it was sung so beautifully just now. But we don't post that here. We just post the talk. But it's easy to find. Just sit with that, the vibration of that music and those words, and keep calling him. God cannot resist us then. I just will finish by reading to you. My first prayer was answered, that my phone wouldn't go off during my talk. Just this morning, and of course I knew I was going to be coming to talk about prayer. There's a very dear friend, of many of us know him, and he's going through a little bit of a rough time right now. So yesterday morning he put out a call. I don't know who got that email. Please pray for me and my wife. We're about to face a very difficult situation. So we all prayed, and then last night he wrote us again and said, your prayers must have been answered because it all went very well. So very quickly I wrote back, beautiful, Jai Guru, we love you, you continue to have our prayers, things like that. Jyotish wrote, Master is with us in these big events and in the little details of life. In fact, he is always with us. It is we who are not always with him in our own forgetfulness. This is the daily quest of the devotee. Jai Guru, he says, and thanks for his sweet grace in this test. It is we who are not always with him, but the minute we sit down to pray, the minute we say, I'm here, Divine Mother, the minute we have that thought, the minute we head in that direction in ways that are unimaginable, that presence reaches down, embraces us, and lifts us up in ways that we could never do ourselves. It's not sophisticated, it's not complicated, it doesn't take sitting for long periods. Open your heart, and I will enter and take charge of your life.